The morning light filtered through the worn curtains of Sarah Mitchell's modest apartment in Portland, Oregon. At 35, she had the weary eyes of someone who had fought battles most people couldn't imagine, but her smile remained genuine, especially when directed at her 12-year-old daughter, Lily. "Mom, did you remember to pack my headphones?" Lily called from her bedroom, her fingers expertly tracing the braille markings on her books as she organized her backpack. "Right. Here, honey," Sarah replied, placing the headphones in Lily's outstretched hand. Their fingers touched briefly, communicating more than words ever could. Lily had been blind since birth, but Sarah never saw it as a limitation. Instead, she marveled at how her daughter had developed an extraordinary sensitivity to the world around her. Where others relied on sight, Lily built her reality through sound, touch, and an intuition that sometimes seemed almost supernatural. "You're bringing me to the office today?" Lily asked, excitement edging her voice. She rarely got to visit her mother's workplace, a small accounting firm, where Sarah worked as an administrative assistant. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson couldn't watch you today," Sarah explained, checking her watch. "You'll need to stay in the waiting area while I work. I brought your audiobooks and some snacks." Sarah's job at Reynolds Financial Services wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Most of them anyway. They had managed on a single income since Lily was born, and while they never had much, Sarah made sure her daughter never felt the weight of their financial struggles. "Will Mr. Reynolds be there today?" Lily asked, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. "I'm not sure," Sarah replied, a slight tension in her voice. "He doesn't come to the office much anymore." Douglas Reynolds, the founder and CEO of Reynolds Financial Services, was something of a phantom figure at the company. In the 3 years Sarah had worked there, she had only seen him a handful of times. He preferred to work from his secluded estate on the outskirts of the city, communicating primarily through emails and conference calls. The bus ride downtown was filled with Lily's questions about the office building, the people who worked there, and what Sarah did all day. Sarah answered patiently, marveling at her daughter's endless curiosity. When they arrived at the Reynolds Financial Building, Sarah guided Lily through the revolving doors and across the marble lobby. The security guard greeted them warmly, having met Lily on her few previous visits. "Morning, Miss Mitchell, and hello there, Lily." "Good morning, Mr. Turner," Lily replied, turning her face toward the sound of his voice with a bright smile. Sarah led Lily to the elevator, describing the lobby's features as they walked. "The ceiling is very high today with those crystal chandeliers I told you about. They catch the morning light and scatter little rainbows all over the floor." Lily nodded, absorbing every detail. "It smells like coffee and that lemony cleaning solution they use," she observed, "and someone's wearing a new perfume, something with vanilla." Sarah smiled at her daughter's acute observations. Lily's ability to detect and process sensory information that most people overlooked never ceased to amaze her. On the 14th floor, Sarah settled Lily in the small waiting area adjacent to her desk. It was a comfortable space with plush chairs and a water cooler, designed to make clients feel welcome while they waited for appointments. "I'll be right at my desk if you need anything," Sarah assured her, placing Lily's backpack within easy reach. "Just stay in this area, okay? There are important meetings happening today and we don't want to disturb anyone." Lily nodded, already reaching for her headphones. "I promise I'll be quiet." The morning passed uneventfully. Sarah answered phones, organized files, and prepared the conference room for an afternoon meeting. Occasionally, she glanced over at Lily, who sat contentedly listening to her audiobook, her fingers dancing across the pages of a braille book she had brought along. Around noon, Sarah was about to suggest they go downstairs for lunch when a stir of activity near the elevator caught her attention. The atmosphere in the office shifted instantly. Postures straightened, voices lowered, and a current of tension rippled through the air. Douglas Reynolds had arrived. Sarah had encountered him only a few times in passing, and he had never acknowledged her beyond a curt nod. He was a tall, imposing figure with salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they surveyed. At 51, he had built Reynolds Financial from nothing into one of the Pacific Northwest's most respected wealth management firms. His unexpected appearance sent the office into a flurry of activity. The department heads emerged from their offices, gathering around him with folder-laden hands and anxious expressions. Reynolds hardly seemed to notice the commotion he caused, striding purposefully toward the main conference room with his assistant, trailing behind him. Sarah turned back to her computer, trying to appear busy. Reynolds had never shown any interest in the support staff, and she preferred to keep it that way. The less she interacted with the intimidating CEO, the better. But then she heard Lily's headphones fall to the floor. Sarah looked up to see her daughter standing perfectly still, her head tilted slightly as if listening intently. Lily's face had gone pale, her unseeing eyes wide with an emotion Sarah couldn't identify. "Lily, what's wrong?" she asked, moving quickly to her daughter's side. But Lily wasn't listening. Her attention was completely focused on something else, or rather someone else. As Reynolds's deep voice echoed from the conference room giving instructions to his team, Lily's expression transformed from shock to recognition, and then to something like wonder. Without warning, she stepped away from Sarah's reaching hands and moved with surprising confidence toward the sound of that voice. Before Sarah could stop her, Lily had crossed the waiting area and was standing at the edge of the main office space, her face turned toward the conference room. And then, with perfect clarity and absolute certainty, Lily called out a single word that shattered Sarah's carefully constructed world. "Daddy." The office fell silent. Every head turned toward the blind girl standing in the doorway, her small frame vibrating with emotion. Douglas Reynolds froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color as he stared at Lily. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side, heart pounding. "Lily, what are you doing? Come back to the waiting area." But Lily remained rooted to the spot, tears streaming down her face. "It's him, Mom, it's really him, I know his voice." Sarah felt dizzy, her mind racing to make sense of what was happening. How could Lily possibly recognize a voice she had never heard before? Reynolds had never been part of their lives, had never even known about Lily's existence. Yet the look on Reynolds' face told a different story. He stared at Lily with a mixture of shock, recognition, and what appeared to be guilt. His usual, commanding presence had crumbled, leaving him looking vulnerable and strangely human. "I'm sorry," Sarah mumbled to the room at large, attempting to guide Lily back to the waiting area. "She's just confused." But Reynolds had regained his composure and was approaching them slowly, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. "Wait," he said, his voice oddly gentle. "Please wait." Sarah froze, her protective instincts warring with her confusion. As Reynolds stopped before them, she could see his hands trembling slightly, an unmistakable crack in his perfectly controlled facade. "What's your name?" he asked Lily softly. "Lily Mitchell," she replied without hesitation. "And you're my father." The certainty in her voice sent a shockwave through Sarah. There was no question in Lily's mind, no room for doubt. Somehow, in some inexplicable way, she knew. Reynolds looked at Sarah then, really looked at her for perhaps the first time. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by understanding. "Sarah," he said, her name sounding strange on his lips. "I think we need to talk." The buzz of whispers filled the office as employees tried to process what they were witnessing. Sarah felt exposed, vulnerable, her private life suddenly thrust into the spotlight. But more than embarrassment, she felt anger building inside her. Anger at Reynolds for appearing so suddenly in their lives, anger at herself for bringing Lily to the office, and confusion at how her daughter could possibly recognize a man she had never met. "Not here," Sarah managed to say, her voice tight with emotion. "Not like this." Reynolds nodded, then turned to his assistant. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day." To the office at large, he announced, "Everyone, please, return to your work." As the employees reluctantly dispersed, Reynolds gestured toward his private office. "We can talk in there." Sarah hesitated, clutching Lily's hand tightly. Every instinct told her to take her daughter and leave, to run from this moment and the complications it would bring. But Lily's face was alight with emotion, her unseeing eyes somehow fixed on Reynolds, as if she could perceive him through other means. "It's okay, Mom," Lily whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand. "I've been waiting so long to meet him." Those words, spoken with such innocent certainty, were what finally broke Sarah's resistance. With a deep breath, she nodded and followed Douglas Reynolds into his office, crossing a threshold she knew would forever change their lives. The silence in Douglas Reynolds' office was stifling. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Portland's skyline, but Sarah couldn't appreciate the vista. Her attention was divided between her daughter, who sat with an expression of serene certainty, and the man who now stood with his back to them, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the city he had conquered. "Would you like something to drink?" Douglas finally asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Water? Coffee?" "I'd like answers," Sarah replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Starting with how my daughter recognizes you when she's never met you before today." Douglas turned, slowly, his face a mask of restraint. He looked at Lily with a mixture of wonder and apprehension before shifting his gaze to Sarah. 13 years ago, he began, at the Financial Analysts Conference in Seattle. Sarah's breath caught. She remembered that weekend vividly, a rare opportunity she had seized to advance her career. Fresh out of college and determined to climb the corporate ladder, she had saved for months to attend the prestigious conference. Douglas Reynolds had been one of the keynote speakers, a rising star in the financial world. "The hotel bar," she said quietly. "After your presentation." Douglas nodded, moving to sit behind his desk. The physical barrier between them seemed appropriate for the conversation they were about to have. 3 days, he continued. 3 days that I've thought about more often than I care to admit. Sarah felt Lily's hand tighten around hers. The painful irony wasn't lost on her. Those 3 days that had meant nothing more than a conference fling to Douglas had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "I didn't know," Sarah said, her voice stronger now. "I didn't know who you were." "Not really. You introduced yourself only as Doug. No last name, no details about your company." "A deliberate choice," Douglas admitted. "I was avoiding complications." "Well, here's your complication," Sarah gestured toward Lily. "Although I still don't understand how she knows you're her father." Lily had been quiet until now, her face turned toward the sound of their voices. "I've always known," she said, suddenly her voice small but unwavering. "Not his name or who he was, but that he existed. I could feel it." Douglas leaned forward, studying Lily with intense curiosity. "What do you mean you could feel it?" "It's like a song you've heard before but can't remember where," Lily tried to explain. "Your voice feels familiar, like it's been in my dreams. When I heard you speak today, it was like finding the missing piece of a puzzle I've been trying to solve my whole life." Sarah watched as Douglas processed this, his skepticism gradually giving way to wonder. For her part, she didn't know what to believe. Lily had never shown any interest in her father before, had never asked the difficult questions that Sarah had rehearsed answers for countless times. "After Seattle," Sarah said, steering the conversation back to practical matters, "I discovered I was pregnant. I tried to find you, but all I had was a first name and a vague description. By the time I learned who you really were, Lily was already born, and she hesitated. "I made the decision to raise her on my own." "You never contacted me," Douglas stated, his tone more curious than accusatory. "Would it have mattered if I had?" Sarah challenged. The famous Douglas Reynolds, financial wunderkind, being told he had fathered a child with a woman he barely knew. A blind child at that. She regretted the words as soon as they left her mouth. Lily's expression fell slightly, and Sarah quickly squeezed her hand. "That's not what I meant, sweetheart. You know that." "It's okay, Mom," Lily said with a maturity beyond her years. "Being blind is part of who I am. It's not something to be ashamed of." Douglas stood abruptly and walked to the window again, his reflection in the glass revealing a conflict of emotions that his voice had carefully concealed. "I would have wanted to know," he said quietly, "regardless of the circumstances." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Really? The man who uses a private elevator to avoid interacting with his own employees would have welcomed a child into his life? Forgive me if I find that hard to believe." Douglas turned to face her, his expression hardening. "You don't know me, Sarah. You spent 3 days with me 13 years ago. You don't get to decide what I would or wouldn't have done. The truth of his words stung, but Sarah refused to back down. "And you don't know us. We've managed just fine without you all these years." "Have you?" Douglas challenged, his gaze sweeping over Sarah's worn blazer and scuffed shoes before returning to her face. "Because from where I'm standing it looks like you've been struggling." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. "We have everything we need." "No, we don't," Lily interjected, surprising both adults. "We need you, Mr. Reynolds. Mom won't say it, but I will." Sarah stared at her daughter in disbelief. "Lily, that's not true. We've always been a team, just the two of us." "I know, Mom," Lily replied gently. "And you've been amazing, but I've always felt like something was missing. Now I know what it was." Douglas approached Lily slowly, as if afraid she might vanish if he moved too quickly. He knelt before her chair, bringing himself to her eye level even though she couldn't see him. "You can call me Douglas," he said, his voice softer than Sarah had ever heard it. "Or Doug, if you prefer." "Can I call you Dad?" Lily asked, her directness cutting through the tension. Douglas hesitated, glancing at Sarah before returning his attention to Lily. "I think I'd like that very much." Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions roiling inside her. Part of her wanted to protect Lily from inevitable disappointment, while another part acknowledged her daughter's right to know her father. And beneath it all was a simmering resentment toward Douglas for his ability to waltz into their lives and potentially win Lily's affection with his wealth and status. "This is all happening very fast," Sarah said, struggling to maintain her composure. "We need time to process." Douglas nodded, rising to his feet. "Of course, but I'd like to propose something." He returned to his desk and retrieved a business card, writing something on the back before handing it to Sarah. "My personal number. I'd like to arrange a proper meeting, dinner perhaps, at a place of your choosing." Sarah accepted the card reluctantly. "I don't think—" "Please, Mom," Lily interrupted, her expression pleading. "Just one dinner, that's all I'm asking." Looking at her daughter's hopeful face, Sarah felt her resistance crumbling. "One dinner," she conceded. "But I have conditions." "Name them," Douglas replied without hesitation. "This stays private for now. No one at the office needs to know about our connection." Sarah glanced toward the door, all too aware of the curious ears that might be listening on the other side. "Agreed." "And no grand gestures," Sarah continued. "No expensive gifts or attempts to buy Lily's affection. If you want to be part of her life, you need to earn it through time and effort, not money." Douglas's expression tightened momentarily, but he nodded. "Anything else?" Sarah looked at him directly, allowing him to see the protective fierceness in her eyes. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Lily deserves better than that." The unspoken message was clear. "I won't let you hurt her the way you hurt me." "I understand," Douglas said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for how things ended between us, Sarah. I was a different person then." Sarah didn't acknowledge the apology. Instead, she stood and took Lily's hand. "We should go. I've been away from my desk too long." "As it is." Douglas moved quickly to the door. "Don't worry about that. Take the rest of the day off, with pay, of course." "I don't want special treatment," Sarah protested. "It's not special treatment to give an employee time off after an emotionally charged encounter," Douglas countered. "Besides, I think we all need some time to reflect on what happened today." Sarah couldn't argue with that logic. As they prepared to leave the office, Douglas spoke again, his voice hesitant. Would it be all right if I hugged you, Lily? Only if you're comfortable with it, of course." Lily's face lit up. "Yes, please." Sarah watched as Douglas awkwardly embraced her daughter, his movements stiff and uncertain. Lily, however, showed no such hesitation, wrapping her arms around him as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. As they stepped into the elevator, Sarah felt the weight of what had just transpired settling on her shoulders. 13 years of carefully constructed normalcy had been upended in a single morning, and she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. "Are you okay, Mum?" Lily asked as the elevator descended, her perceptiveness as uncanny as ever. "I'm just processing, honey," Sarah replied, squeezing Lily's hand. "How about you?" How are you feeling?" Lily's smile was radiant. "Like I finally found something I didn't even know I was looking for." As they exited the building into the bright Portland afternoon, Sarah couldn't help wondering if Douglas Reynolds' sudden appearance in their lives would bring the completion Lily so clearly yearned for, or if it would simply introduce new fractures into their already fragile existence. Back in his office, Douglas stood at the window watching as Sarah and Lily emerged onto the sidewalk below. From 14 stories up, they looked so small, so vulnerable. He felt a tightening in his chest that he couldn't quite identify, something between panic and longing. He reached for his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Henry," he said when his lawyer answered, "I need you to clear your schedule. Something's happened, and I need your advice." As he explained the situation, Douglas couldn't take his eyes off the small figure being led through the crowded sidewalk. His daughter. The word felt foreign in his mind, heavy with implications and responsibilities he had never prepared for. For a man who had built his empire on careful planning and calculated risks, Douglas Reynolds suddenly found himself in uncharted territory, facing the most consequential decision of his life, whether to embrace the family he never knew he had or retreat to the safe, solitary existence he had perfected over the years. The agreed-upon dinner was scheduled for Friday evening at Riverside Grill, a modestly upscale restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. Sarah had chosen it deliberately, nice enough to feel special for Lily, but not so extravagant that they would feel out of place. It represented the middle ground she hoped they could establish. In the 3 days since the encounter at Reynolds Financial, Sarah had cycled through every emotion imaginable. Anger at Douglas for his sudden intrusion into their lives. Fear that Lily would be hurt when his initial curiosity inevitably waned. Hope, despite herself, that her daughter might finally have the father figure she deserved. And beneath it all, a persistent anxiety about how Douglas Reynolds, with all his wealth and influence, might change the delicate balance of their lives. "Is this okay?" Lily asked, twirling in her blue dress, a hand-me-down from their neighbors, daughter that Sarah had carefully altered. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Sarah replied, adjusting the ribbon in Lily's hair. "Blue has always been your color." "Do you think he'll like it?" Lily's voice carried a vulnerability that made Sarah's heart ache. "He'd be a fool not to," she assured her daughter, though privately she wondered if Douglas would even notice. Thing arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, a habit Sarah had developed to allow Lily time to orient herself to new environments. The maitre d' greeted them warmly and led them to a table by the window, where the soft sounds of the river provided a calming backdrop. "There are 23 tables in the main dining area," Sarah described, continuing the practice they had established years ago. "Ours is by a window overlooking the river. There's a small vase with fresh flowers, I think they're daisies, and the tablecloth feels like linen." Lily nodded, absorbing the details as her fingers explored the edge of the table, the napkin, the silverware. This spatial awareness was crucial for her confidence in navigating the world. "He's here," Lily said suddenly, her head turning toward the entrance. Sarah looked up, startled. Douglas was indeed walking toward them, following the maitre d'. He wore a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, but he had at least foregone a tie, making a visible effort to appear less formal. "How did you know?" Sarah whispered to Lily as Douglas approached. "His cologne," Lily explained. "Sandalwood and something citrusy, and his footsteps, they're confident but measured, like he's always thinking about his next move." Before Sarah could respond, Douglas reached their table. "Sarah, Lily," he greeted them, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness that Sarah found unexpectedly humanizing. "Thank you for suggesting this place. It's lovely." "We like it here," Sarah replied, watching as he took the seat across from them. "They have a good children's menu for Lily." "Actually, Mom, I thought I might try something new today," Lily interjected. "Maybe whatever Mr. Reynolds, Dad, recommends." Sarah noticed Douglas's expression soften at Lily's use of Dad, the formality of his posture easing slightly. "Well," he said, studying the menu, They have an excellent grilled salmon that I think you might enjoy. Not too fancy, but very flavorful. I'd like to try that, Lily decided, folding her hands neatly on the table. The waiter appeared then, and Douglas ordered a bottle of sparkling water for the table, carefully avoiding wine in what Sarah recognized as a gesture of solidarity. It was a small consideration, but she appreciated it nonetheless. As they settled into the awkward dance of small talk, Douglas surprised Sarah by directing most of his questions to Lily, genuine inquiries about her interests, her schooling, her favorite books. He listened intently to her responses, showing none of the distracted impatience that characterized most of his business interactions. "You enjoy music?" he asked after Lily mentioned her piano lessons. "I love it," Lily replied enthusiastically. "Mom found a teacher who specializes in teaching blind students. I've been taking lessons for 3 years now. She's quite talented," Sarah added, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "Her teacher thinks she has perfect pitch." Douglas nodded thoughtfully. "I played piano as a child. My mother insisted on it, though I never had much aptitude." "Would you play with me sometime?" Lily asked, her face alight with hope. I haven't played in years," Douglas admitted, "but perhaps we could play together sometime, yes." The food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Sarah watched as Douglas discreetly oriented Lily to the location of different items on her plate, using the clock method that Sarah had taught her years ago. The gesture, so natural and considerate, caught her off guard. "You've done research," she observed quietly when Lily was occupied with her meal. Douglas met her gaze directly. "I've spent the past 3 days learning everything I could about parenting a visually impaired child. I don't want to make mistakes out of ignorance." The admission was so unexpected that Sarah found herself momentarily speechless. It was the first indication that Douglas might be taking this newfound fatherhood seriously, beyond mere curiosity or obligation. "That's thoughtful of you," she managed finally. As the meal progressed, the initial tension began to dissipate. Lily, with her remarkable ability to put people at ease, carried much of the conversation, regaling Douglas with stories from school and anecdotes about her and Sarah's life together. It was during dessert, a shared chocolate cake that Lily had insisted upon, that Douglas finally broached the subject they had been dancing around all evening. "I've been thinking about how I might be part of your lives going forward," he began carefully, his fingers tapping lightly against his water glass. "If you both are amenable, of course." Sarah set down her fork, instantly alert. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "Regular visits to start," Douglas replied. "Perhaps I could take Lily to her piano lessons occasionally, or we could have dinner like this once a week." "That sounds wonderful," Lily exclaimed before Sarah could respond. "There's more," Douglas continued, his gaze shifting to Sarah. "I'd like to establish a trust fund for Lily's education. Nothing extravagant, just enough to ensure she has access to the best schools and resources." Sarah felt her defenses rising. "We've managed just fine without your money all these years." "Mom," Lily whispered, her hand finding Sarah's wrist. "Please listen." Douglas leaned forward, his expression earnest. "This isn't about charity, Sarah. It's about responsibility. I've missed 12 years of Lily's life, years I can never get back. But I can make sure her future is secure. Please allow me to do at least that much." Sarah studied him, searching for hidden motives or condescension, but found only sincerity in his eyes. Still, the idea of accepting financial help from him felt like a surrender, an admission that she hadn't been enough for Lily on her own. "I need time to think about it," she finally said. "The trust fund, I mean. The visits are." She glanced at Lily's hopeful face. "The visits are fine as long as they're consistent." Relief flashed across Douglas's features. "Of course, take all the time you need to consider the rest." As they prepared to leave, Douglas insisted on paying the bill despite Sarah's protests. Outside the restaurant, an awkward moment ensued as they stood together on the sidewalk, uncertain how to conclude the evening. "I thought perhaps we could walk by the river for a while," Douglas suggested tentatively. "It's a beautiful evening." "Can we, Mum?" Lily asked, her excitement palpable. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. For a little while. The river walk was busy with evening strollers enjoying the mild spring weather. Douglas walked on Lily's other side, offering his arm for guidance when the path narrowed. Sarah watched their interaction with mixed emotions, noting how naturally Lily seemed to trust him. "Tell me about your company," Lily requested as they walked. "Mom says you built it from nothing." "That's mostly true," Douglas admitted. "I started with very little, but had some lucky breaks along the way." "Was it worth it?" The innocent question carried surprising weight. Douglas was quiet for a moment. "It seemed so at the time," he finally replied. "Now I'm not so sure." "Because you were lonely?" Lily pressed, her perceptiveness cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "Lily," Sarah cautioned, "that's a rather personal question." "It's all right," Douglas assured her. "And yes, Lily, I suppose I have been lonely. Success means very little when you have no one to share it with." The raw honesty of his response surprised Sarah. The Douglas Reynolds she had glimpsed in Seattle 13 years ago had been charming but guarded, revealing little of his true self. This vulnerability was new and disconcerting. They paused at a viewing point overlooking the river, where Douglas described the cityscape for Lily's benefit, pointing out landmarks and sharing historical tidbits that Sarah hadn't known. His knowledge of Portland was extensive, and he had a gift for description that painted vivid pictures with words. "You make it sound so beautiful," Lily sighed. "It is beautiful," Douglas replied, "but seeing it through your ears, experiencing it the way you do, makes me notice details I've overlooked for years." The comment struck Sarah deeply. It echoed her own experience of parenting Lily, how her daughter's unique perspective had transformed her understanding of the world. That Douglas had grasped this fundamental truth so quickly was both reassuring and unsettling. As the evening cooled and Lily began to tire, they made their way back toward the restaurant where Sarah had parked their car. Douglas's driver was waiting nearby in a sleek black sedan that seemed utterly out of place in their modest lives. "I had a wonderful time," Douglas said as they prepared to part ways. "Thank you both for giving me this chance." "When can we see you again?" Lily asked, her hand still holding his arm. Douglas looked to Sarah, clearly respecting her authority as Lily's primary parent. "Perhaps next weekend? Saturday lunch, maybe?" "That would work," Sarah agreed, finding herself reluctant to end this surprising connection. Douglas knelt to Lily's level, his movement still somewhat awkward but increasingly natural. "May I hug you goodbye?" Lily's response was to throw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him off balance. Sarah couldn't help but smile at his startled expression, which quickly melted into something approaching tenderness. As they drove home, Lily chatted excitedly about the evening, reliving every moment of their interaction with Douglas. Sarah listened, offering appropriate responses, while privately grappling with her conflicted feelings. "You're worried?" Lily observed during a lull in the conversation. "Your breathing changes when you're anxious." "I'm just processing," Sarah replied, using the phrase that had become their shorthand for complex emotions. "He's trying, Mom," Lily said softly. "I can feel it. He's trying to be what we need." "I know, honey." Sarah reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand. "But people like Douglas Reynolds, people with his kind of wealth and power, they live in a different world than we do. Maybe we need to build a new world together," Lily suggested with the simple wisdom that never failed to humble Sarah. "One where all of us belong." As they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment building, Sarah found herself hoping, against all her better judgment, that such a world might be possible after all. 3 months had passed since that first dinner at Riverside Grill. Spring had given way to summer, bringing longer days and warmer nights to Portland. In that time, Douglas had become a consistent presence in their lives, not an everyday fixture, but a reliable one. He had kept every promise, shown up for every scheduled visit, and maintained a respectful distance from Sarah's authority as Lily's mother. Today was different, though. Sarah stood in the kitchen of their apartment, watching through the window as Douglas's car pulled into the parking lot. Today marked a significant milestone in their evolving relationship. "Is he here yet?" Lily called from her bedroom, where she was putting the finishing touches on her outfit. A new dress that Douglas had bought her for the occasion, with Sarah's reluctant blessing. "Just arrived," Sarah confirmed, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. "Are you ready?" Lily emerged from her room, the pale yellow sundress complementing her fair complexion and auburn hair. At 12, nearly 13 now, she stood on the cusp of adolescence, growing taller and more poised with each passing day. "How do I look?" she asked, twirling once. "Beautiful," Sarah replied honestly. "You'll be the star of the recital." The ECU piano recital was Lily's first major performance, the culmination of years of lessons and practice. When her teacher had announced the summer showcase, Lily had immediately asked if both her parents could attend. The word "both" had resonated in Sarah's mind for days afterward, a simple acknowledgement of how much their lives had changed. A knock at the door announced Douglas's arrival. When Sarah opened it, she found him looking uncharacteristically casual in khaki pants and a light blue button-down shirt, a small bouquet of flowers in his hand. "These are for the pianist," he said with a smile, handing the bouquet to Lily, who had appeared at Sarah's side. "Yellow roses for good luck, just like my mother used to give me before my recitals." Lily buried her face in the blooms, inhaling deeply. "They smell wonderful. Thank you, Dad." The ease with which Lily used the term still startled Sarah sometimes, though she had grown accustomed to the reality it represented. Douglas was Lily's father, and despite all her initial misgivings, he had proven himself worthy of the title through consistent effort and genuine care. "Ready for your big day?" Douglas asked, offering his arm to Lily. "A little nervous," she admitted. "But Miss Jenkins says nerves are just excitement in disguise." "Wise woman, your teacher," Douglas nodded. "My piano teacher used to say something similar, though his version involved more threats about wasted potential." Sarah gathered Lily's sheet music and her purse. "We should get going. We want to be there early so Lily can get comfortable with the piano." The community center where the recital was being held was only a 15-minute drive from their apartment. Douglas had offered to have his driver take them, but Sarah had insisted on driving her own car, maintaining the independence she valued. Douglas had conceded gracefully, another small indication of how he had learned to navigate their complex dynamic. As they settled into the auditorium, Sarah observed the easy rapport that had developed between Douglas and Lily. They had discovered a shared love of classical music during their first few visits, and Douglas had begun attending Lily's lessons occasionally, reconnecting with his own musical background in the process. "What if I mess up?" Lily whispered as the time approached for her to take her place backstage with the other students. "Then you'll keep going," Douglas replied before Sarah could speak. "That's what my teacher taught me. The audience rarely notices mistakes unless you draw attention to them by stopping. And even if they do notice," Sarah added, "they'll be impressed by your courage for performing at all. That takes real bravery." Lily nodded, absorbing their encouragement. "Will you both be right here when I'm done?" "Front row, left side, 5th seat in," Douglas promised, having already made sure Lily knew exactly where they would be sitting. "And I'll be wearing the cologne you like, so you can find us by scent if needed." This thoughtful detail, one of many Douglas had incorporated into his interactions with Lily, brought a reluctant smile to Sarah's face. He had thrown himself into learning about vision impairment with characteristic thoroughness, consulting specialists and reading extensively on the subject. As Lily was led backstage by her teacher, Sarah and Douglas took their seats in the rapidly filling auditorium. An awkward silence fell between them, as it often did when they were alone together. Despite the truce they had established for Lily's sake, there remained an undercurrent of tension, a complex mixture of past hurts, present uncertainties, and unspoken feelings. "She seems calmer than I expected," Douglas observed, breaking the silence. "She gets that from you," Sarah replied. "That ability to control her nerves in public." Douglas looked surprised by the observation. "I always thought of it as a learned skill, not an inherited trait." "Maybe it's both," Sarah conceded. "Nature and nurture working together." Before Douglas could respond, the lights dimmed and the recital began. They sat through several performances by other students, some more accomplished than others, all receiving enthusiastic applause from the supportive audience of parents and family members. When Lily's turn came, Sarah felt Douglas tense beside her. She glanced over to find him leaning forward slightly, his usual mask of composure slipping to reveal naked anticipation and anxiety, the unmistakable emotions of a parent watching their child step into the spotlight. Lily was guided to the piano by her teacher, who whispered something in her ear before stepping away. For a moment, Lily sat perfectly still, her hands hovering over the keys as she oriented herself. Then, with a deep breath that was visible even from the audience, she began to play Debussy's Clair de Lune. The music flowed from her fingers, with a sensitivity that belied her years, each note precise yet somehow deeply personal. Sarah had heard Lily practice the piece countless times, but never with this emotional resonance, this confidence. She was playing not just with technical skill, but with her heart, and the effect was mesmerizing. Sarah was so absorbed in Lily's performance that she didn't notice Douglas's reaction until she heard a soft sound beside her. Turning, she was astonished to see tears streaming down his face, his expression one of complete wonder. "She's extraordinary," he whispered, not taking his eyes from Lily. "Yes," Sarah agreed, her own eyes filling with tears. "She is." When the piece concluded, there was a moment of reverent silence before. The audience erupted into applause. Lily stood, her face flushed with triumph, and bowed in the direction of the sound. As the applause continued, Sarah saw her daughter's face turn unerringly toward their seats, a brilliant smile illuminating her features. At the reception following the recital, Lily was surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations. Douglas stood back, allowing her this moment in the spotlight. But Sarah could see the pride radiating from him, pride he had earned the right to feel through months of genuine involvement. "She reminds me of my mother," he said quietly when Sarah joined him at the refreshment table. "Not physically, but in spirit. My mother had that same quiet determination, that same sensitivity to beauty." "Tell me about her," Sarah encouraged, realizing she knew almost nothing about Douglas's background beyond what was published in business profiles. "She was a piano teacher," he replied, his gaze still on Lily across the room. "Classically trained. Could have been a concert pianist, but chose to teach instead. She believed music should be accessible to everyone, not just the elite." This revelation surprised Sarah. Somehow she had imagined Douglas emerging fully formed from the world of high finance, not raised by an artistic, idealistic mother. "What happened to her?" she asked. "Cancer, when I was 16, Douglas answered, a shadow crossing his face. "She never got to see what I built or what I lost building it." The vulnerability in his voice touched something in Sarah that she had been guarding carefully. Before she could respond, Lily appeared before them, glowing with excitement. "Did you hear?" she exclaimed. "Miss Jenkins says I can participate in the statewide competition next month." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah replied, pushing aside the moment of connection with Douglas to focus on her daughter's achievement. "It's in Seattle," Lily continued breathlessly. "Miss Jenkins says I'll need to prepare 3 pieces instead of just 1. "Seattle," Sarah repeated, the word carrying unexpected weight, the city where this complicated journey had begun 13 years ago. "I was thinking," Douglas said carefully, "perhaps we could make a weekend of it. I have an apartment there we could use, save you the hotel expense. Separate rooms, of course," he added quickly, seeing Sarah's expression. "Please, Mom," Lily pleaded. "It would be so much fun to have both of you there." Sarah hesitated, caught between practical concerns and emotional ones. A weekend together would cross boundaries she had carefully maintained, yet she couldn't deny that Douglas had proven himself trustworthy thus far. "Let me think about it," she said finally, offering the compromise that had become her standard, a response to Douglas's increasingly frequent suggestions for deeper integration into their lives. Later that evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Sarah found herself on the balcony of their apartment, staring out at the city lights. Douglas had dropped them off hours ago, declining her perfunctory invitation to come up for coffee, with a perceptiveness that both relieved and disappointed her. The sound of Lily's bedroom door opening interrupted her thoughts. Mom, are you out here? Yes, honey, couldn't sleep. Lily joined her on the balcony, wrapping herself in the throw blanket from the couch. I keep hearing the music in my head. It won't let me rest. Sarah smiled, pulling her daughter close. That happens sometimes when we're excited or emotional. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the warm summer night enveloping them. Mom, Lily said finally, can I ask you something important? Of course. Do you still hate him? Dad, I mean. The directness of the question took Sarah aback. I never hated him, Lily. I was angry and hurt, but that's not the same as hate. But you don't love him either, Lily pressed. Sarah sighed, uncertain how to navigate this conversation with her perceptive child. It's complicated, sweetheart. Your father and I barely know each other, really. But you could try, Lily suggested. To get to know each other better, I mean. Is that what you want? Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. I want us to be a real family, Lily admitted, her voice small but determined. Not living together, maybe, at least not yet, but connected. All of us. The simplicity of Lily's desire and the complexity of fulfilling it created a knot of emotion in Sarah's chest. I don't know if that's possible, honey. Why not? Lily challenged. He's changed, Mum. I can feel it. He's not the same person who hurt you back then. How can you be so sure? Sarah asked, genuinely curious about her daughter's unwavering confidence. Because I can hear the truth in his voice, Lily replied without hesitation. When people lie, their voices change. There's a tension, a falseness. Dad's voice is different when he talks about us now. It's warmer, more real. Sarah considered this, wondering at her daughter's extraordinary ability to perceive what others missed. Could it be that simple? Could the changes she'd observed in Douglas over the past months be genuine transformation rather than temporary accommodation? I'll try, she promised finally. I can't guarantee anything more than that, but I'll try to be more open to possibilities. The next morning, Sarah made a decision. After dropping Lily off at her summer program, she drove to the downtown high-rise where Douglas lived. She had never been to his penthouse apartment, maintaining that boundary despite his occasional invitations for dinner. The doorman recognized her from Douglas's authorized visitor list and directed her to the private elevator. As she ascended to the top floor, Sarah rehearsed what she wanted to say, the careful boundaries she needed to establish, the expectations she wanted to set. All her planned words evaporated when Douglas opened the door, clearly just returning from a run, his hair damp with sweat and his expression one of complete surprise. Sarah, is everything all right? Is Lily okay? She's fine, Sarah assured him quickly. I need to talk to you about Seattle. He ushered her into the spacious apartment, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. Let me just grab a shirt. Make yourself comfortable. Left alone, Sarah wandered to the windows, taking in the perspective so different from their modest third-floor view. From up here, the city looked orderly, manageable, all its complexities reduced to a pleasing pattern. Would you like coffee? Douglas asked, returning in a fresh t-shirt. I just made some. Please, Sarah nodded, turning to face him. Now that she was here, she found it difficult to begin. Douglas poured 2 cups and led her to a sitting area overlooking the river. I'm guessing this is about more than just accommodation arrangements for the competition. Sarah smiled, despite herself. You've gotten better at reading situations. I've had an excellent teacher in Lily, he acknowledged. She doesn't let me get away with social obtuseness anymore. She wants us to be a family, Sarah said bluntly, deciding directness was the best approach. All 3 of us. Douglas set down his coffee cup carefully. And what do you want, Sarah? The question, so simple yet so loaded, hung between them. What did she want? Safety and security for Lily, certainly. But beyond that? I want to understand how this happened, she admitted. How my daughter recognized a voice she'd never heard, how she formed a connection with you that sometimes feels like it transcends logic. And I want to understand who you really are now compared to who you were 13 years ago. Douglas was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "I don't have an explanation for how Lily recognized me," he said finally. "I've consulted experts, read studies on genetic memory and intuition. None of it fully explains what happened that day in my office." "And the second part," Sarah pressed. "Who are you now, Douglas?" He met her gaze directly. "I'm still figuring that out. For most of my adult life, I defined myself by what I built, what I achieved. Success was my identity. Then Lily called me Daddy across a crowded office, and suddenly everything I thought I knew about myself was called into question." The raw honesty in his voice resonated with Sarah's own experience of motherhood, how Lily's birth had fundamentally altered her understanding of herself and her purpose. "These past 3 months," Douglas continued, "spending time with Lily, seeing how you've raised her, it's changed me. Or maybe it's revealed what was always there beneath the ambition and the isolation. I don't know if I can be the father she deserves, but I want to try. More than I've wanted anything in a very long time." "And what about me?" Sarah asked, the question emerging before she could reconsider. "Where do I fit in this new identity you're discovering?" Douglas's expression softened. "You're the heart of it, Sarah. The foundation. Everything good in Lily comes from you. Her resilience, her empathy, her courage. I admire the life you've built for her, for both of you. I'm just hoping there might be room in it for me, too." The sincerity in his words disarmed her final defenses. This was not the calculating businessman she had expected, nor the charming but distant man she had met in Seattle so many years ago. This was someone new, or perhaps someone who had been buried beneath layers of ambition and fear for too long. "I think," she said slowly, "that we could start with Seattle. One weekend, 3 people trying to figure out what family means to them. No promises beyond that, just possibility." The smile that transformed Douglas's face then was unlike any expression she had seen from him before. Unguarded, genuine joy that reached his eyes and softened the lines of his face. "I can work with possibility," he agreed, extending his hand to her. As Sarah took it, she felt something shift between them. Not romance, not yet, but a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose that might, with time and care, grow into something deeper. 6 weeks later, as their plane descended toward Seattle, Sarah looked across the aisle where Lily sat beside Douglas, their heads bent together as he described the view outside the window. The ease between them, the natural affinity that had bloomed despite years of separation, still amazed her. "We're flying over Puget Sound now," Douglas was saying. "The water looks silver in the sunlight, and there are ferries crossing between the islands, leaving white trails behind them like comets. Are the mountains visible?" Lily asked eagerly. "Yes, Mount Rainier is standing guard to the southeast, covered in snow even though it's summer. It looks like it's floating above the clouds." Sarah smiled, remembering how she had once seen that same mountain from a hotel room in downtown Seattle, never imagining how that weekend would ultimately change the course of her life. As if sensing her thoughts, Douglas looked up and met her gaze across the aisle. The understanding that passed between them required no words. They were both thinking of that weekend, of all that had been lost and found in the years since. "We're starting our descent into Seattle-Tacoma International Airport," the pilot announced over the intercom. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Sarah asked Lily, who would be performing in the competition the following afternoon. "A little," Lily admitted. "But Dad's been helping me with visualization techniques, and you've been practicing with me every night. I feel ready." "You'll be magnificent," Douglas assured her. "But even if you hit a wrong note or two, remember, keep going and most people won't notice," Lily finished for him with a grin. "I know, Dad." As the plane touched down on the runway, Sarah felt a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a circle closing, making room for new beginnings. Whatever came next for them, whether as co-parents maintaining separate lives or something more integrated, they had already accomplished something remarkable. They had created a family forged not from obligation or tradition, but from choice and commitment and love. Lily reached across the aisle, her hand searching for Sarah's. When she found it, she squeezed tightly, her face alight with happiness. "We're all here together," she said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "It feels right, doesn't it?" And with surprise and gratitude, Sarah realized that it did. Beyond all logic, beyond all her carefully constructed defenses, beyond the pain of the past, it felt absolutely right. As the plane taxied to the gate, Douglas caught her eye again, his expression a question and a promise. Sarah smiled in response, no longer afraid of the possibilities that awaited them in this city where their story had begun. Sometimes, she reflected, the most profound vision came not from what the eyes could see, but from what the heart could recognize. And in that moment, Sarah understood what Lily had known from the beginning. Some connections transcended explanation. Some bonds could not be broken by time or distance, and some families were destined to find their way back to each other, no matter how unlikely the path. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah, Douglas, and Lily's journey has touched your heart. Their story reminds us that sometimes the deepest connections don't require sight. They require openness, forgiveness, and the courage to embrace second chances. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about unexpected family reunions and the healing power of forgiveness. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the extraordinary power of connection.